Welcome back to Know to Grow, a light to heavy duty podcast, everybody. Today, leading up to Heavy Duty Aftermarket Week, I have my friend and peer on, Stephen Dawson with Hunter Engineering. Stephen, introduce yourself, and then we'll jump into it. I know you have a unique perspective on things in the auto, medium, and heavy duty space.
Absolutely. Thanks, Chandler. Yeah, so I've had a lot of years in the automotive experience from the time I was 16 all the way up through now, working in various aspects of the industry. One of the areas that I love is that heavy duty space and working on those commercial trucks, larger scale trucks. I've had a lot of experience with working through that industry and being a part of shops that are repairing and rebuilding those trucks. And I think the industry's changed a lot over the years from a heavy rebuild engines, every half a million miles down the road, to an industry that is far more closer to the automotive industry, where we're looking for those finite changes that have a huge impact in the long run.
Helpful. And, most of our listeners are going to know what Hunter sells, but can you give a hierarchical category of some of the products?
Great. Yep. So we're in the wheel service business. So that is basically anything along chassis and wheels, for alignment, for tires changing, for balancing, brake lays, that sort of thing. Even inspection, for being able to, at over a few seconds, be able to inspect if it's a vehicle, a car, or a heavy truck with its trailer and everything. We're able to measure all of those alignment angles. So we're heavily in the wheel service business. We're a U.S. built company. So we're privately held. We're based out of St. Louis, and we manufacture a large majority of our products in Mississippi, and a little bit of it in Missouri, still in St. Louis. So we focus very heavily on that wheel service side of the industry, and don't really deviate too far from that.
Good, good. Thank you. So we'll start today off by talking about the state of the equipment industry. Then following that, we'll talk about shop productivity and growth in the fleet maintenance space. As far as the state of the equipment industry goes, let's talk about some of the complexity of repair and moving more towards autonomy of repair, electronics, ADAS, that type of thing. You've seen a lot change over your career. Now we're in 2026. From your standpoint on the equipment side, let's talk about that for a few minutes.
So technology has just massively grown. If you look at the vehicles and the trucks that we're working on today, where everything was mechanical years ago, is now gone to electronic. Same with our equipment technology, is that same way. And as the ADAS and autonomy comes into if it's a trucking industry or automotive industry, it requires a significant level of complexity of repair, as well as complexity of equipment to do those repairs, in making sure that we're either getting the right angles, or that we're placing a target or a mat in the right place, so that a repair can be done completely and actually work and go out on the road and actually perform well for the driver.
As far as buying cycles go, maybe go back to, I don't know, 2010, and just kind of, tell the listeners where we are in terms of kind of these broad buying cycles.
So it's, there is a big change in the industry of that technology over that period of time. And, I like to say that we've always been kind of the leader in the alignment side of the business. So there was a lot of brand recognition that way, and continues to be that way. But there's also that kind of layer over of that technology, and is our tool the right tool for that technology that you're working on, and that particular vehicle that you're working on, and making sure that it's the right equipment. It is a much more detailed process, where before it was kind of a measurement, and as long as we're getting a measurement, we're good. In today's world, it's a whole lot more about, not only are we kind of the measurement side of it is the minimum of doing business. Now it's how does this tool actually impact my business, and positively grow profit margin, positively have an impact on the drivers that are operating the vehicles after we're done doing the repair. So it's a lot more of the smaller details than it was, 10, 12, 15 years ago. It was far more of, we just need something that's going to read those angles. And in our case now, we're not only reading those angles, but providing the tools for somebody to be really efficient.
Good. And we'll jump into some of those questions here in a few minutes. I recently put together a report in the space talking about growth in the industry and kind of a macroeconomic backdrop. And one of the things I came across was the one big beautiful bill is bringing back full expensing of capital investments, which is called bonus depreciation. So I think it was going to basically drop down to 20% in 2026, extended to 100% of expensing most of those qualifying capital investments. That actually starts the 19th. So a week from today, next Monday. Do you see anybody that or do you guys forecast a pop of orders coming in Q1, or do you have any kind of experience or thoughts around that?
So it's the challenge with it is that a lot of us in this industry are not planners. So we don't look at it going, we're, January 19th, January 20th. If I invest in a piece of equipment today, what can I do for profitability down the line?
Yeah.
For the most part, most of our shops are very reactive in that we're at the end of the year and the accountant says, hey, you've made too much this year and we need some depreciation. Now, the fact that this is locked in, it gives, my reps out on the road, another talking point and really something else for a shop to think about when they're making a capital improvement. Not only is it, a capital improvement on we're buying this and we're going to write it off, but what kind of profitability can that drive throughout the year? So it lends itself very well to being able to say, look, I'm going to make $100,000 investment in my shop, buy this piece of equipment here in January. And I know that I'm going to need that write-off because we're going to generate $200,000 or $300,000 worth of business with that one piece of equipment. And the challenge with it when people wait to react to it is they buy that piece of equipment the last day of the year, they write it off for the previous year. Now they're going to have 365 days of making money with that tool and are going to have to kind of look at it again and go, all right, now I got to buy another piece of something at the end of that year to be able to cover up that, as opposed to making it kind of a one for one that, hey, we're buying this one now with the idea that it's going to drive our profitability. We're going to protect ourselves from the tax implications of it.
Yeah. So my takeaway would be talk with your CPA, your tax advisor, to really kind of think through new equipment. Obviously, equipment doesn't last forever, and starting the 19th, it could be a good opportunity to invest. So, and there's more. Yeah.
That lends right to making sure that when you're looking at that equipment, what was, again, before just looking for basic functionality, making sure that you're talking with whoever's selling you a piece of equipment and saying, hey, what is the ROI that I can expect from this tool? So that when you're meeting with that CPA and accountant, you can say, okay, not only am I going to have this expenditure, however, we're also anticipating it having this amount of return throughout this year, so that we can start planning for our taxes in January instead of reacting to our tax implication at the end of December when it's difficult to do things.
Excellent. And then what do you feel like the process, and I know you just touched on it a little bit, but what do you think the process should look like for making a decision for a capital purchase for a shop? I mean, think about a shop with 6 or 7 locations. Obviously that equipment's expensive. So maybe walk us through the process a little bit more.
So I think the best thing for a shop to do is kind of sit down and think about what are those minimum requirements that we need to have, and make sure, kind of narrow the field that, all right, these are the tools that are going to be meet those requirements. And I think one of the things in today's day and age that has to be a big part of that is, what is the support for that piece of equipment? So by and large, the equipment themselves and what it can do, but then by and large, the equipment is really what's pivotal in it is the ability for it to be supported and having uptime throughout its normal process. So really kind of identifying those pieces, those minimum requirements, then looking at what is that service level that I'm going to get provided from either the manufacturer, the provider, whatever that happens to be. And it may be, how do I help market this going forward? How do I support it to make sure that I get the most uptime? And then the other one that I think is a big one is, how do I train my team to actually operate this as efficiently as possible? And in that, do I have to change my processes for it? And really kind of drilling down through that, because as we look at a lot of what we're changing in the industry right now is requiring a process. If that's on the collision space where we're dealing with the alignment process, if it is moving a heavy duty truck shop that's been primarily in the engine overhaul, transmission overhaul, rear axle overhaul business, to I need another revenue stream because motors are lasting longer, they're more efficient in what they're doing. I need to add another revenue stream, which means I need to change my processes in my location and make sure that I'm incorporating all of that equipment.
It's very insightful. And obviously, I know you're in the DC area, but you spend a lot of your time, you've been in tons of shops, right? A lot of owners. So you see it firsthand, right? I mean, your experience, has equipped you to be able to tell the story here. Shop productivity. How do good shops increase their productivity with regards to equipment?
So it's really about footsteps, and that was something that was drilled into me at a young age in a dealership world, is that every footstep that a technician takes out of their bay is costing us productivity, costing us what we have to sell, and the inventory of a shop is really the time in the day for the amount of technicians, and the more that those technicians are out of their bay and are doing something else, the more that it's costing us in productivity. So how can we reduce their footsteps, make sure that they're more efficient at it? Things like our racks have what we call power slide on them. So they lock and unlock the turn plate. So a technician doesn't have to be pulling pins to be able to adjust a vehicle. On a heavy truck, we can put sensors on 3 axles and roll it in one process. So in probably 2 or 3 minutes, 4 minutes, to have all the heads on a truck and then roll it forward the 18 to 24 inches that it's going to roll, we're ready to do numbers. Or we're ready to make adjustments. I'm sorry. We have our numbers to be able to make our adjustments. So all of those things are ways to reduce that amount of footsteps, reduce that amount of time to get something that's, say, a non-productive task done, so that we can make it far more lucrative, in the productive work that we're doing.
Good. It's helpful. As a regional sales manager, I know that, sometimes, maybe I guess kind of more of that blue collar shop, right? It's just, sometimes the sales pitch, maybe the best way to put it is if you have an inexperienced salesman, right? They could just come to the market and say, hey, we're selling lifts, but you need to talk in terms of KPIs to shop owners, one location, multi-locations. Obviously Footsteps is one of them. What other kind of KPIs are you talking about? I mean, a lot of shop owners don't track them. I've had a lot of conversation on this podcast about KPIs and the importance of them and how shop owners have been able to dig in and turn their businesses around. Actually, I had Fabian Bongine on last week with 4 locations up in Canada. And he said when they implemented them, his cash flow turned around. So talk about some of the other KPIs besides footsteps and wasting productivity.
Right. Well, the other side of that is, what are we bringing in for vehicles? And then are we really taking the time on those vehicles to identify everything that's available for it? So let's say hours per repair orders, jobs per repair orders are critically important. So it's about being able to identify those things. We don't want to be over repairing a vehicle or doing repairs that aren't necessary. We want to make sure that when a vehicle shop goes in, especially in the commercial space, that we're identifying everything that truck needs, because if that truck comes in today, we repair it, send it back down on the road, and it breaks down later on. It comes back on us and it comes back on our customer. So making sure that we're taking the time and looking at each shop has their own KPIs, what's important to them. But the big ones that we see are, the amount of vehicles coming in a day. And that's where an ownership and leadership is there to do that marketing. Maybe a sales team is out trying to generate that fleet business coming in. But even with that, they can only bring in so much if the service department doesn't take great care of it when it's there. So it's making sure that we're looking at every single thing. If that's some kind of a pre-inspection process, to be able to determine what's going on, and then looking at those items that can be expected, that can be of huge value to a customer going down the road, as to what's going to impact their business. The end consumer, the end driver, the end fleet, what's going to impact their business the most. Most of the shops that I run across, they're looking for how many hours per repair order they're running, or how many jobs per ticket that they're doing. Are they being as efficient as they can? What is that efficiency level? Looking at technician to technician, do we have an efficiency level where it's if we're an hourly shop, but we're still tracking our flat rate hours, are we running a technician that is running 40 or 50 hours of compared to 45 or 50 flat rate hours, and then the next one is doing in 40 or 50 hours is doing 20 or 25 hours? Where is that disparaging difference? And then is it something that we can overcome either with training or with repositioning the jobs in the shop? Make sure that we're giving the right job to the right technician to be as efficient as possible in what they're doing. And it's one of the nice things with a lot of the services that we provide, and the way that our equipment is it makes it very easy for even the entry level technician that maybe is struggling to do some of the more complex repairs and be as efficient as one of the other technicians are. Our equipment starts to become a level playing field for them, where an experienced technician and an inexperienced technician can really kind of follow the steps on the screen, read the screen, as we would say, and take care of that vehicle very efficiently and effectively.
Good. When it comes to like shop looking at a variety of equipment, right? Let's just say they service auto, they do heavy duty, medium duty, whatever it is. Is there a way for you guys to kind of model out those returns for owners that are really thinking about boosting their efficiency? I mean, obviously case studies are always great, right? You can say this shop did it and, they grew their gross margin by, 3 or 4%, whatever that number is. But can you kind of like model that out for shops and give them some kind of comfort knowing that if they make a big CapEx investment like this, they can get a return?
Yeah, so we regularly model out that way. We work very, very tightly with ROIs in everything that we're doing. And in a lot of the cases, that's going to be, again, part of that, what makes the difference between one supplier or another. When our reps are coming in, they're going to ask a whole bunch of questions, and they're going to better understand what's driving that customer in that location. And they're going to build that based on their numbers, the amount of trucks that they have coming in. What are they seeing failing? They might even bring in a piece of equipment and say, hey, let's check a bunch of these and see what that opportunity is coming in throughout the day, so that we can extrapolate it out using your numbers and your traffic coming through, so that you can feel confident that, all right, this is easily done. I remember way back when I first really kind of heavy duty, or it was a medium duty, heavy duty combo system. So our alignment systems can do, we call it Kia to Kenworth, Volvo to Volvo. We can build the system so that it will do everything with one machine when it comes on the alignment side. And I had a customer that was on the fence about moving forward, and I bet it had probably been 6 months that he'd been hanging out on the fence. And I think what finally kicked him over was I just took that ROI and put it down in a check form and made a kind of one of those play oversized checks for him, and wrote it out for he would have had in sales had he had that equipment on day one when we talked about it.
Yeah.
And it was a rude awakening when he looked at it and went, oh my God, that's half the cost of the equipment. Why am I waiting? Why am I dragging my feet? Let's go and let's do this right now.
And then regarding the labor shortage and hiring good technicians and so forth, finding them and retaining them, what does a shop with good or newer equipment, capable equipment, have to do with retention and attraction?
Yeah, well, that's one of the things that I find in being a former technician. You go to a shop that's investing in the equipment that you're going to use as a technician, you feel pretty confident that, all right, I can come here and I can make some money. I can hustle and get trucks in and out the door. When it's run down old equipment that you're constantly having to fix to be able to use it, or it doesn't work very efficiently, or it's older technology and it doesn't match up to today's vehicles, can get extremely frustrating. And I've seen it where shops have said, technicians have kind of banded together and said, hey, if we're not upgrading this stuff, we're out. We're going to go find somewhere else to go because we just can't function in in old equipment that isn't working and that sort of thing. And then the other side of that is, if you've already got that technician and you're bringing in new equipment, you're bringing them into that process, that decision process, that puts them in a position where, why am I going to leave? Why am I going to go somewhere else when I have, a company that values my opinion and that they give me all the tools that I can succeed with? I don't know where I'm going to go, where I'm going to get those kind of tools and the ability to support, to support my own earnings as a technician. So I think it's critically important that shops look at what you have for equipment and technology within the shop. If that's wheel service equipment or AC equipment or diagnostic equipment, I think that's a critical piece. And we do a lot with Hunter with that to help customers really retain. The other side of that is, like in our world, we do a lot of training. So between our 63 training centers across the country, and our online Hunter University, we offer a lot of tools for a shop to offer to their technicians for training. And again, that same thing, if as a technician, I feel more valued if my owner is investing in me, and I'm less likely to leave and go somewhere else. I want to be with that company that has invested in me and has helped me grow as an individual and move to the next level or be more efficient at what I'm doing. So I think that all kind of hand in hand, as we talked earlier about deciding what equipment that we get, I think there's a lot of pieces that need to be put into that equation, because it's no longer just a tool. There's a lot more involved in it.
Do you, what percentage of shops roughly do you see are kind of behind the bell curve on updating their equipment? Obviously you can't update it every year, and that's fine. That doesn't mean you're behind, but is there a number? Is it 10%? Is it 5%? I mean,
each segment is a little bit different, and in the heavy truck space, it's probably a little bit slower. And one of the things we often say is, we are our best competitor, because there's a lot of the times our equipment can be, 15, 20 or 30 years old and still work like it did 15 or 20 or 30 years ago. The challenge with it is technology has changed. So, those sometimes the update process has to happen a little bit quicker because technology is changing and the information that needs to be in there is a little bit faster. But I would say on a percentage base in the heavy duty truck space, it's probably pretty close to a 50-50. I'd say about 50% of the time you got shops that are like right on it. I want to have the latest and greatest, and I'm going to do whatever I need to do to make sure that my techs have the tools that make them successful. And then the other half figure, I'm going to try and ride it out as long as I can. And usually they end up having a little bit more heartache and headache when it comes to if it's staffing of leaving or downtime and repairs that need to be done and that sort of thing. Because if you're in a fast moving shop, you're using this equipment pretty hard.
Yeah, makes sense. So this podcast is all about growth and scalability. So let's talk about fleet maintenance growth. Obviously from an equipment standpoint and what the equipment can enable a shop to do in terms of offering new products and services. You mentioned that you can grow your business with suspension and alignment repairs. I know suspension, for example, can be complex work. You don't necessarily, learn it overnight. Talk to us about that. I want to understand that a little bit more.
Yep. So the beauty in the heavy duty space is that most of these trucks, the are extremely adjustable to make sure that the wheels are going in the right direction. However, there is also let's say a misknown of the industry in that the belief is that it's not adjustable, that it's straight axles on the back of a truck and I can't do anything about adjusting them. And all I've got to do is set toe on my front wheels and I got solid axles and I'm good to go. And the reality is that's not the case. In a car, we're very concerned about the front end. In a tractor trailer or a dump truck, that sort of thing, the front end's important, but really the rear axles are what causes us or what causes the fleet owner the most amount of cost. If that's tires or fuel, that's typically where the majority of things are lost, is in those rear wheels. So when you got a shop that is, let's say, historically been heavy on doing doing mechanical work, on doing engines, transmissions, that sort of thing, this is suspension and steering work is a great way to add that revenue stream into the shop, but also drive results for your end consumer, your fleet operator in that maintenance, because we're going to help reduce their number one and number two expense. In the trucking industry, it's fuel and tires. And the challenge with it, what we see a lot is that the rear axles, and we call it scrub angles. So our rear axles, when they're mounted in a truck, they're actually all, in most cases, fairly adjustable. And if those axles are either offset side to side to each other through a track bar, or they're at an angle, I don't know if I can put it on the screen, kind of cockeyed to each other, as they're going straight down the road, they're actually dragging and adding friction to the tire, wearing the tire out prematurely, making unusual tire tread patterns on it, as well as costing more fuel to actually press that throttle down harder to drag the truck forward. So it's it's one of those things where if we add that revenue stream, not only are we adding a revenue stream for the shop, we're also adding in a huge amount of value when it comes to the fleet side of it in reducing those tires and fuel costs. And the one thing that is probably less top of the mind kind of thing is the driver fatigue. If you imagine driving a truck, especially a trailer, where you got a trailer that's misaligned, and we've probably all seen them where you're driving down the road and you can almost read one side of the trailer because it's a little bit off to an angle behind the tractor. That driver is constantly working that wheel to keep that trailer in the lane and keep it off the Jersey barriers. And they're really just kind of slowly sawing at the wheel all the time. And it's fatiguing to a driver. Not to mention that in the industry, steering wheels being centered in our car and being perfectly straight when we're driving down the highway straight has been a norm for decades, right? Everybody looks for that straight steering wheel. And if it's a little crooked, that's reason to go right into the dealership to get it straightened. In the heavy truck space, there's a lot of them that it's way off right from the beginning, right from when they got the machine or got the truck, and they don't know any better. And it is a huge impact to be able to center that steering wheel and square that steering wheel up to a truck and have it go straight down the road, just like your car is going down. It takes a lot less out of the driver as they're operating.
That's a good point, because I bet if you had, on a tractor and trailer and, had a couple wheels off even 1 degree, the client wouldn't notice it. I mean, the customer would probably be satisfied, right? But, 1 degree or half a degree or a quarter of a degree or 15,000 miles, that's extra tread, that's extra diesel fuel. So yeah, very interesting point there. And then
Yeah,
Yeah, go
there's
ahead.
the other thing we see too is the dualies where they're mounted on the rear wheels, mounted together. And I was at a shop not too long ago. They were running some garbage trucks, and they had the garbage truck had clipped the curb and ripped the outside tire off, or ripped
Yeah.
the hole in the outside tire. They slapped a new tire on it. Well, there was about an inch difference, or 3/4 of an inch maybe, from basically the diameter of the outer tire to the inner tire, because the inner tire had a bunch of miles on the road. And we have two wheels now bolted together because their circumference is different. As
Yeah.
the truck is rolling down the road, it's running at the circumference of the big wheel, and
Mhm.
that small wheel is constantly dragging to catch up.
Yeah.
We regularly hear from customers say, "Man, I just keep tearing up inside tires, or I'm tearing up my inside tire, and then I'm putting my outside on my inside and putting a new outside on, and then I'm tearing it up again." And it's usually because they're mismatched. And like with our system, as the tire gets on a wheel balancer, we
Mhm.
identify that diameter and that circumference of the wheel, so that when we're matching them up on a dually, we're not having that same problem, which means that we're getting far more miles out of that tire. And I think it was a an English study of emissions from a truck, and it was somewhere close to 1,000 times more emissions, harmful to the environment, came off of the tire tread wear and the heat generated from tires and the little bits of rubber that get worn off, than it was from the exhaust pipe. And
Interesting.
that all of that rubber that gets worn off of it goes into the road, gets washed away with rain, ends up in our storm drains, ends up in our oceans. And the better we can align our trucks, the better we can keep those tires mounted together so that they're getting the most amount of tire life out of them. Not only does it save us cost of tires and fuel, it helps the environment a little bit as well.
Do you see shops using this as a competitive angle and talking about this to folks, or is it more of an opportunity for them to do this?
I think it's more of an opportunity. I think there's a select few that are heavily engaged in this and really
Mhm.
try and get this out for their customers.
Yeah.
But I don't think it's industry wide as of yet. I think there's a huge amount of opportunity, and for your listeners that want to say, "Hey, I want to be different in the truck space than everybody else," it is a phenomenal way to do that, and to really drive that message home. And that's one of the nice things. Like with Hunter, we have a number of marketing materials and things to help shop convey that message to a fleet manager and that sort of thing, so that they understand why they're doing those repairs. And I know I've never done it before, kind of responses that they get. We want to have those tools to be able to help them answer that question.
And this is suspension and alignment related, right? I mean, this is kind of what.
So yeah, alignment, suspension, and really even tire balancing, tire changing, tire balancing.
Got it.
Yep.
ADAS. So obviously this is, becoming a very big space from an M&A standpoint. And what I'm seeing, we know folks. I met with somebody recently, doing $8 million in EBITDA, growing business, the ability to get into every state is obtainable. A lot of these new cars, have level 2 ADAS in them. And it's just a big market. In terms of medium and heavy duty, what are we seeing now and what do we expect to see in terms of ADAS?
So I would venture to say that long haul wise, like highway long haul, and actually I had heard from somebody at the NTSB at a presentation I was at, that they believe that long haul was going to end up being approved autonomous more nationwide than in the heavy truck space than in cars. Or it'll be sooner in the heavy truck space. And there's already a lot of companies that are out there going through that process. The technology is there to do it, but it needs a lot of refining still. And I think one of the companies that does it, every single time the truck goes out on the road, they recalibrate all the sensors to make sure that it's going to be as accurate as possible. And What we found on the light duty side is that we periodically will have some drift, where, a perfectly calibrated vehicle over time will start to vary in how it operates. And that could be from, suspension damage or suspension wear and tear and that sort of thing, or just the computer's trying to learn a little bit more and maybe not learning completely. Right now in the heavy duty space, there's probably more autonomous functions in the heavy duty space, even than in a lot of the light duty space, just because they've been doing it for a little bit longer.
Mhm.
It's going to be, the nice thing with it is that the majority of it is what we call a dynamic calibration. So a shop today can have the right scan tool to be able to communicate with a Peterbilt or Kenworth or International and get it into that calibration mode and then drive it through that drive cycle to get it recalibrated. So if you're in that space and you're not looking at how do I fit into calibration and fit into the ADAS space, I think it's leaving money on the table, number one, and it's going to mean that it's going to be a chaotic catch-up time, that the more progressive shops are going to blow right past things, because it's a big challenge. And you look at companies like FedEx and UPS, they've had for 10 plus years in their contract to buy a truck that it has to have automatic braking and that it has to have some of those safety systems as their bare minimum. And they're not alone in it. I think the large majority of the major fleet companies want to have those systems because they know that there is potential for driver fatigue and things where the computer, as long as everything is set right and is built right, computer doesn't take a day off. It doesn't, shut down for a couple hours. It doesn't get drowsy. It just continues to operate and keep everybody on the road safe. So like I say, if you're not in that space today, I would definitely take the time to learn. There is a ton of opportunities for education when it comes to ADAS. Take the opportunity to learn and how it impacts your customers. And if you're running a shop that's managing a number of fleets, I would absolutely look at making sure that if they're running automatic braking system trucks and that sort of thing, that you're understanding what they're putting in their build specs when they're buying new trucks. So that number one, you're capable of continuing to service it. And number two, that when you are servicing it, I liken a lot of these repairs to, if you put, 3 brake shoes on instead of all 4, you're liable for that repair and making sure that the truck goes out on the road safe. If you're doing a repair that requires you to recalibrate it afterwards and you're saying, I never learned anything about it, I'm just sending it, that's tantamount to putting on 3 brake shoes instead of all 4.
Yeah.
We know that would be ugly for a customer.
So you mentioned dynamic calibration. Right now, the industry is focused on static, right? So you have to, it's my understanding, you have to bring the vehicle in the shop. You have to have a perfectly flat floor, 0-degree angle. There's nothing really in there once you get in there besides, kind of a black and white screen for the laser to kind of align and hit it properly. As we, obviously there's always going to be, a vehicle can't dynamically calibrate after it's been in a collision. You actually have to replace the camera or radar. But from a dynamic standpoint, is Hunter investing in this, investing in static calibration as the industry kind of moves toward more of a dynamic calibration where the vehicle can do it itself?
So there's a couple fold with that one. So yeah, we as a measurement company, all target setting is for static calibration is setting targets using measurements from the vehicle, where it's at, and setting a target at a known distance, square and center to the front of the car at a known height, or at a prescribed height from the OEM. So yes, we have all of that equipment, and I see a lot of the manufacturers will offer dynamic, I would say some of them are dynamic only, some of them are static only, and more of them are going to the dynamic / static. So you can do it either way.
Yeah.
As some shops I hear all the time saying, hey, I want everything to go dynamic. Hopefully everything goes dynamic. Then I don't have to worry about having space in my shop. I can calibrate everything. Well, that's great, other than that when it's snowing or it's raining and you have those kind of conditions, maybe it's even traffic conditions where you got to go 25 to 45 miles an hour in a straight line for 10 to 30 minutes, that, you might be in an area, here in the DC area, to find a place where you can go, 25 to 45 miles an hour with lines on both sides of the road for 20 to 30 minutes straight. It's pretty rare. You're running into a lot of traffic and that sort of thing. For a shop owner too, if you wanted to go out, if you were going to do dynamic for everything, now that's trusting your technician to go take a car for an undisclosed amount of time. So it's got to drive for 10 to 30 minutes. Now I have customers that have to drive 20 minutes to a location where they can drive that 10 to 30 minutes to do the static calibration. And do you want to have a technician leaving your shop to go do all of that driving? Or do we want to do it statically, where I can do a time study as to how quickly I can park that car, set that target, tell it to calibrate. And on top of that, I've got confirmation that my target was correct and that my car calibrated correctly. And I was able to control the time, and I can do it all day long, any day of the week, because I have a set out space to be able to do that in.
Yep.
Good. So it's, there's a double-edged sword with it when it comes to, I don't have any space, but the reality is, in the maintenance side of the business, we don't necessarily need a massive amount of space. The collision space needs a little bit more of a space, or we need to be creative with our space. So it might not be that I've got to have a dedicated, whitewashed room to be able to do this in, but it might mean that I'm only going to do these 3 calibrations at the end of the day, when I can clear out the main section of the shop and have enough space to do those calibrations. But all throughout the day, I can do those other ones that don't require as much space.
Yeah.
And we help a lot of customers with that. That's one of the other things when you think about as purchasing equipment is, do you have a vendor that can come in and help you say, yes, this is the right space to do this in, or here's the changes that I would suggest, or maybe even map it out and put it together on a design so you could say, all right, if we move this lift over here, we can open this space up and have that amount of room. Do you have a vendor that's actually getting involved with what you have in the shop, and how can you make it all work?
And for our shop owners to know, it is an extremely profitable service to offer. I was in an ADAS calibration shop in the kind of the Rocky Mountain region last year, and Rivian had 18 cameras on it, and I think the bill was $2,000 to $3,000, and fairly quick turnaround. So, something to strongly consider and differentiate yourself. So we're really bullish on the space. I think there's going to be some consolidation here that happens pretty quickly, but the market's still trying to figure itself out. So, Stephen, I think that's, kind of the bulk of this podcast. Is there anything, one owner should kind of lead with today as they've been watching your podcast on how to scale, how to grow, kind of with an emphasis on equipment?
Well, if you're a heavy duty truck shop and you're not in the, the kingpin suspension kind of business, you should absolutely be looking at that, because as time goes on, that is going to be far more profitable. Nobody wants to have a truck down for 3 weeks getting a motor rebuilt. They want to have something they can get in and out the door and send the invoice to the customer and have them be much happier with how the vehicle operates. And if you're really looking to grow your heavy duty space, I think that's a critical piece. And then to our last conversation is, if you're not familiar with ADAS and how it affects the vehicles you're working on, make sure to take a class, get involved. There's a lot of different programs. I know I'm doing 3 or 4 things this year. I know there's several of my counterparts within Hunter doing different events. There's plenty of opportunity for training. I would absolutely jump on that training and really understand that ADAS space and how it affects your market.
Excellent. Stephen Dawson, Hunter Engineering, thank you so much for joining Know to Grow, a light to heavy duty podcast. And we'll definitely be in touch.
All right. Sounds
Cheers
great.
to a fruitful 2026.
Same to you, Chandler. Thank you. Have a good one.